Hey guys, welcome back to Kinetix Performance Coaching, your home for information on topics of strength, nutrition, and longevity. So today let's talk about bread for a minute, because when people are trying to clean up their diet, a lot of times the topic of bread becomes one of the foods where they think, okay, do I need to get rid of bread? And not necessarily. If you're going to eat bread, one option I tend to like better is traditional sourdough. Now just remember that sourdough is still bread. I don't want to pretend that suddenly because something says sourdough on the package, it means that it's some kind of superfood. And remember, there's gimmicks out there like that. So this is where we got to clear things up. The interesting part of sourdough is actually how it's made. Traditional sourdough goes through like a longer fermentation process using wild yeast and beneficial bacteria. And during that fermentation, those microorganisms actually begin breaking down parts of the flour before you even eat it. So it kind of creates more of a pre-digestible bread. That's one of the reasons why people find a real long fermented sourdough a little easier to digest than bread that's produced very quickly. And that's really the first big difference. Fermentation actually changes the bread. Another thing that happens is that during fermentation, there's these productions of organic acids. Those acids can then slow down the digestion of some of the starch in the bread. So compared with a lot of conventional white breads, sourdough may give you a more gradual blood sugar response instead of that carbohydrate, just hitting quite as quickly. And you can improve that even further by looking at the whole meal. Instead of just eating bread by itself, maybe you're having sourdough with eggs, meat, Greek yogurt, and that's what I do. Sourdough avocado, sourdough egg, sourdough with lean chicken. I find it to be a really good, easy carb. Also, the carbohydrate isn't really very high on it, so you can get by with a little more. It's also super easy, right? You want it toasted, very easy, or just by itself. But when you actually have those things, it also gives you some protein, healthy fat, and fibers, and kind of makes it a complete meal. So, and then there's another part that people don't hear about as often, is that grains naturally contain something that's called phytic acid. And phytic acid can bind to certain minerals and make them less available for your body to use. Fermentation can reduce some of that phytic acid. So potentially you're making minerals like iron, zinc, and magnesium more available from the food. Again, that's not because sourdough has some magical ingredient added to it. It's because the fermentation process has changed what's happening inside the actual dough. And so then we get into something I think is really important when we're talking about food quality is the actual ingredient list. Real traditional sourdough, because there's a lot of brands out there. You'll see sourdough, but you got to look at the label. Real traditional sourdough can be incredibly simple. Flour, water, salt, and a ferment. That's it. So compare that with some commercial breads. Flip them over. You might have sugars, refined oils, preservatives, dough conditioners, and a much longer list of ingredients. So sourdough gives you an opportunity to choose a bread that's just a simpler food, and that's always going to be better for our gut. There's also the interesting gut health component to fermentation. The live bacteria that involved in making the sourdough aren't surviving the heat of the oven, so I don't want people to think they're eating a probiotic food in the same way. They might eat yogurt or another live fermented food, and we do talk a lot about fermented foods, so please check out those videos. But the fermentation process leaves behind acids and other compounds that may still help with digestion, so it is a healthier intestinal environment. And then the last benefit is that some of the natural acids that develop during fermentation can also help slow the mold. So traditionally made sourdough, you can notice it staying fresh longer without having to rely heavily on preservatives. And when you really put it all together, this is why I think you should be switching to sourdough. Especially if you have bread sensitivities, and it may be not the actual bread, it may be all this other stuff. So you may get gentler blood sugar responses. Fermentation can improve mineral availability. You can have a simpler ingredient list. And so just remember that don't just buy something because it says sourdough. We're talking about real traditionally fermented sourdough. Farmers market stuff, you can look, but just make sure that it is the real stuff before you buy it. And if you're going to include it in your diet, don't automatically think you have to eliminate it. Just start paying attention to what kind of bread you're buying and how it was made. And we hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned. And remember, come to Kinetix Performance Coaching for information on strength, nutrition, and longevity. Thank you.